You know, we had this sort of really naturalized coastline where, you know, you couldn't really tell this was even a tile-based game. This could be, you know, one of those, this could be sort of a, one of the real-time games where you just have units moving wherever they like to, so it's not obvious that it's a tile-based game. You know, we thought that would be the best way to make it look, you know, make it look real, make it look like the real world. However, after, you know, sort of a year or so of playing, we've determined that this just wasn't fun enough. You know, people were having a really hard time determining, you know, what was land and what was the water. So when we got to version D, you know, that's when we chose that really ugly, sort of over-the-top, blocky coastline. You know, it was sort of really obvious what was land and what was water, but, you know, who cares? It doesn't really matter. The important thing is that players are having fun while they're playing the game. You know, they're able to understand what's going on, you know, make moves, understand their environment, and you know, we decided we would just put off the whole question of how to make the coastlines actually look good. Focus on gameplay. So then once we get to version E, you see we're starting to have the very beginnings of the solution to that, where we have this sort of interlocking 2D system, almost really akin to how Civ 3 worked, except in a 3D environment, of we have certain sort of sets of coastlines that we use, whether it's going, you know, left or right or up or down, or, you know, it's a corner or whatever, and then it sort of randomly chooses from those sets to lay down, you know, a block of coastline that looks good, while still being fairly obvious where the land and the water is. When we get to version F, you see we're just sort of iterating on that. Now we have beaches, nice looking beaches involved, and sort of more natural curves as it goes around. And, you know, here is our final version of the coastline, which you can see, you know, it's still nice because you can clearly understand where is land, where is water. You know, you know, it's still pretty fairly clear that it's a tile-based game, but it looks good. You know, it looks like real natural coastline. You know, it's that good compromise between, you know, appearance and functionality, you know, without compromising or frustrating the player. You know, it was a very nice look where we got to, but you know, it was a very long path to get there, including at one point, you know, sort of just giving up on our first attempt at making it look good.
That really required a lot of hard work by Brian Busati and Greg Furch, just to take the really simplistic shapes that we had and make something really elegant with it. But at the end of the day, it turned out much better than we had hoped. You know, because the other thing is that was a real stress moment for that version. Everyone was thinking about E3 and sort of the press's first look at the game, and so everyone really pulled together in the last month to try to show off all the things that we knew the game had, but we hadn't had time to sort of put to the Firaxis level of things. So everyone, at the end of E3, everyone was pretty exhausted, but we felt like we had taken the step that we needed to take to sort of make the final game look the way it was going to look.
Okay, so now we get to version G, which is from June of 2005. This is basically the version that the world saw at E3. Not a whole lot of gameplay changes. Once again, there's some air units involved in the game now that kind of got put off very late in the project because it's sort of a modern era only feature. But graphically, you know, we have some big important changes now. The globe view is now in the game, which is something that people thought was really cool. A big important feature, being able to see the whole world as an actual globe. You know, it was very evocative, a nice feel. We have floodplain art now. There are the multiple unit graphics we've tweaked again. We're down to 3 units. We wanted to reduce map clutter, and also, you know, we had various performance issues with having that many units on the screen. We have much better combat animations. This was a sort of a thorn in our side for a long time. For some reason, we kept having, and Dorian will talk about this a little bit later in the presentation, it just took us forever to try to get combat look actually good. There were various sort of bottlenecks on both sides from a gameplay or an art point of view, and we finally kind of tackled and fixed this problem around this period. We have a nice plateau system for hills, for allowing them to sort of interlock together. Hills never looked that great before. It had that kind of egg carton effect where it was just sort of a stamp hill, and we kind of figured at this point we needed a system to actually let the hills sort of like come together to look more natural. We have a much more subdued terrain texture here. We're almost 180 degrees away from the saturated terrain palette we had from a few versions before. It's a really nice, light coloring system now. It's not over the top at all. It's very pleasing to the eye, and it matches the game really well. A lot of important interface improvements are added at this point. We finally now have go-to lines, and this is, I think, one big mistake, something that I really should have put into the game much earlier in the process, because go-to lines really help people when they play the game, help them understand the rules, help them be more efficient when they're managing their units. So I should have implemented it probably a year earlier. We have the new interface middleware that's been put into the project at this point to give us, widgets that really function as people expect them to. We have, quote-unquote, a final city screen. The city screen is always under development. That's just always happens in a Civ game, because the city screen is so important and so much stuff goes in there. But we really wanted to make a stab at making the city screen have all of the features in place, even if it didn't look particularly great. We have a rebuilt diplomacy screen to match the new the middleware. It was kind of one of our first attempts to use this middleware system in a fully developed screen. More animated leaders are coming online. The city billboards are in place now, so you can actually see a picture of the unit of what's being built in your city, as well as it being kind of this nice specific item that's attached to the cities. We have also some new screens. We have more Civilopedia entries. We have a military advisor. So we're spending more time developing the Python screens to help people understand the game. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about the concept of tiles and how it relates to art. When we started the project, I think our art, the motto or the direction we chose with the art was kind of try to ignore the tiles. We wanted the landscape to look as natural as possible. We wanted the hills to sort of not be chunky, kind of just show up wherever they wanted to. We wanted the rivers to sort of flow naturally through the landscape. Same with the terrain. We didn't want to force the terrain to exist on a tile by tile system. We actually wanted a tile, for example, to perhaps be half desert, half grassland. But there's a problem here. And the problem is the very nature of the game of Civilization, the game that Sid designed, 13 years ago. And you asked a lot of people what Civilization is about, and they'll tell you that Civilization is a turn-based game. That's kind of its defining feature. That's the first thing that comes to people's minds. I would actually counter that notion, though. I think it's incorrect. I mean, obviously, Civilization is a turn-based game. It should always be a turn-based game. But the thing that I think defines it more than anything else is that Civ is a tile-based game. It's really the core of the game experience is the tile, the fact that units are always on a specific tile, and that has implications for movement and for combat and for pillaging, and for it's important what tile you found a city on, and then it's important what tile you build improvements on. It's important what tile your cities work, and then that interacts with military units because they can move on to a tile to pillage you or to prevent your city from working a specific tile. Everything in the game originally comes from those tiles, and if you don't have immediately recognizable tiles in a game of Civilization, you're not going to have a fun game, because it's all going to seem like, the game is going to be, to a certain extent, fuzzy. It's going to be not easy to digest. The thing that makes Civ fun is they make interesting decisions, but they can't make interesting decisions if they don't understand what they're looking at. And that's why you always need to focus on making Civ a discernible tile-based game. It's really the core of the experience. I believe that when you make it a tile-based game, the turn-based nature just sort of naturally flows from that. But making it a tile-based game is really, I think, your first step toward making a fun gameplay experience. And we were making a mistake because we were not emphasizing that. We were actually trying to get away from that art-wise, because it seems like a natural thing to do. It's like, well, tiles don't look good, so let's try to de-emphasize them. Let's try to hide them, and that's sort of not putting the player first. It's not focusing on the things that the player cares about, which, since the game is so tile-based, is going to be tiles. So you see that every single graphical terrain element sort of went through a process where at some point it was natural and then eventually went to become more tile-based. You can see that the hills